Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I continue to bring you a video about the story of Hùng and Hoài Ca. Morning in the small house began with a slow, gentle rhythm of breathing, so quiet that the soft sound of the wind slipping through the old window frame could be clearly heard. Hoài Ca sat lightly by the windowsill, her back resting against a wall faded by time, the early sunlight falling gently across her shoulder. In her hands was a glass of milk, still warm, thin steam rising from it, carrying the familiar feeling of ordinary mornings she had missed so deeply over the past few days. She held the glass with both hands, as if cradling something fragile yet precious, a rare sense of peace after a period when her body had been exhausted and her spirit confined within four walls. Hùng sat down in front of her, his movements slow and careful. He gently checked her leg again, every gesture revealing a concern and attentiveness he kept deeply restrained. The bruises that had once frightened them both had nearly faded, leaving only faint traces, quiet reminders of a hardship that had passed. Her leg was no longer swollen, no longer painful at the slightest touch. Hùng pressed lightly, then released his hand, his expression softening as he realized how much better things had become. Hoài Ca tried to move, taking a few cautious steps around the familiar room. Her steps were still careful, but steadier than before. In that moment, both of them let out a quiet sigh of relief, as if a heavy weight that had pressed on them for days had finally been lifted. For Hoài Ca, being able to walk normally again was not simply about being free of pain. It was the feeling of reconnecting with a familiar rhythm of life, of walking on her own, of taking control of the small daily routines she had once taken for granted. The days spent confined at home, relying on Hùng for everything, had often left her heart feeling heavy. Now, each slow step carried a sense of release, like a quiet affirmation that she was still living, still continuing her journey after days that had felt abruptly interrupted. Hùng reminded Hoài Ca to finish her milk for proper nourishment, his voice low and steady, not a casual reminder, but a concern that had become habitual. He stood up, preparing to leave, yet still paused for a few seconds to look at her once more, as if needing to be certain that everything was truly fine. Hùng told her he would go back to his mother's place to finally resolve the outstanding debt issues. This time, he did not want things to drag on any longer, did not want those worries to continue weighing silently on the family. There was a rare firmness in his voice now, no longer the hesitation or delay of before. He explained clearly to Hoài Ca that he had thought it through carefully. He would go to the old woman's house, the one who had sheltered his mother during this time, and ask her to help contact the lenders to set a specific and clear appointment to settle everything at once. Hùng did not want those debts to continue lingering, did not want his mother to live in constant anxiety, and especially did not want Hoài Ca to bear any more pressure. He said it firmly. After this, he would speak plainly to his mother. There would be no more borrowing under any circumstances. It was not just a financial decision, but a way he chose to protect the people he loved, and also a way of drawing a clear boundary for himself. Before leaving the house, their conversation slowed, shifting to smaller matters that were no less important. They talked about the new bicycle bought for little Duc, an item they had carefully considered for a long time before deciding. Hùng said he would keep the bike at home because the road near his workplace had been muddy lately and was not suitable for a child to practice riding. He did not want to take even the slightest risk. Over the weekend, when Duc came back, the whole family would teach him how to ride right in the yard, where the space was wide, flat, and safe. The image appeared in both their minds, a peaceful afternoon, children's laughter echoing across the familiar yard, everyone together in simple yet fulfilling togetherness. That morning passed quietly, without noise or major events. Just slow conversations and decisions made with calmness and responsibility. Yet it was precisely this quiet that wove an invisible bond between Hoai Ca and Hùng, carrying forward everything they had been through together and opening the way for the next steps, steadier, clearer, on the path they were walking side by side. Elsewhere, removed from the familiar rhythm of the small house where Hoai Ca was slowly recovering, in a quiet garden blanketed in shades of green, Hung's mother was living through rare days of slow and simple calm. The kind old woman's house nestled quietly within nature. No noise, no passing vehicles, only the occasional chirping of birds in the treetops and the gentle wind brushing past the old bamboo fence. In that place, time seemed to move more slowly, slow enough for one to truly feel each passing moment of being alive. Hung's mother's health had stabilized significantly compared to the early days after her arrival. The prolonged exhaustion that once plagued her no longer appeared as often. Though she was not fully strong, she was well enough to walk on her own and take care of light chores around the house. Each morning, she rose early with the old woman, when dew still clung to the leaves. The two elderly women quietly shared the work, one tending the chickens and gathering eggs from dry straw nests, the other picking a few ripe oranges and bringing them into the kitchen. Such seemingly small tasks gave Hung's mother a sense of usefulness, freeing her from the feeling of being a burden confined to a bed as before. Their breakfasts were simple, usually just boiled eggs and a few sweet, refreshing oranges, yet carried a very different sense of fullness. They sat facing each other at an old wooden table, eating and talking slowly. They spoke of self-grown food, of the reassurance that came from eating things made by their own hands, without worrying about medicine or chemicals. The old woman shared stories of her years living alone, accustomed to silence, while Hung's mother listened, occasionally adding a few words in a low, measured voice, as though every sentence had been carefully weighed. Hung's mother's heart was always filled with gratitude. She knew clearly that without this kind woman's help, she might have had nowhere to go, no peaceful days like these. Yet alongside that gratitude grew a quiet sense of guilt, heavier with each passing day. She blamed herself for imposing for too long, for taking away another person's hard-earned peace because of her own mistakes and hardships. Whenever those thoughts surfaced, her gaze would darken, her heart heavy though no words were spoken. The old woman seemed to understand. Whenever Hung's mother mentioned feeling guilty or spoke of wanting to leave soon, the old woman would simply smile gently, a plain but warm smile. She said that having company was far better than living alone in a silent house. Those simple words were not forced comfort, but the sincere thoughts of someone long familiar with solitude, now finding joy in another's presence. Hearing this, Hung's mother could only nod quietly, feeling both touched and deeply conflicted. Despite being treated with such kindness, Hung's mother still hoped her son would come to take her home soon. Not because she did not wish to stay, but because she did not want to rely on others any longer. She understood Hung's situation, knew how much he was carrying, and knew that she herself was one of the reasons his life had become so heavy. With each passing day, she silently wished for everything to be resolved soon, so she could return and face what she had caused on her own. Then one morning, when the garden was as quiet as ever, Hung appeared. He stepped through the gate, his familiar figure making his mother freeze for a moment before she hurriedly stood up. Hung told her that Hoai Ca had returned safely, her health stable, with nothing left to worry about. He also said he had secured enough money to repay the debt, that everything was ready to be settled once and for all. Those words echoed through the still air, and Hung's mother could not hold back her emotions. She was relieved that her son had shouldered part of the burden, yet pained by the knowledge that all of this had begun with her. Seeing Hung's resolute demeanor, His mother felt his maturity more clearly than ever. But before the relief could fully settle, Hung spoke firmly, giving her one very important instruction. He said she must absolutely not reveal the location of the old woman's house to anyone. The lenders were still out there, and he did not want them coming here to trouble the person who had helped his mother during her most desperate time. His warning was not merely caution, it was protection, a clear reflection of Hung's sense of responsibility toward those around him. Hung's mother nodded quietly, committing every word her son said to memory. In that moment, amid the tranquil garden and the modest house, emotions overlapped and intertwined, gratitude, guilt, worry, and a fragile hope that after everything, life would slowly fall back into order. These simple days here might soon come to an end, but their echoes would linger for a long time in each heart, like a necessary pause before stepping into the next chapters of life. The meeting took place in a heavy, tense atmosphere from the very first minutes. The cramped space seemed suffocated by probing looks, veiled remarks, and an unmistakably hostile attitude from the lending group. Sitting across from Hung, they began with their familiar tone of dominance, quickly demanding a higher amount to be repaid, citing accumulated interest over time. The figures were spoken of coldly, as if they were nothing more than an emotionless calculation, completely ignoring the circumstances and the consequences they had inflicted on an entire family. Hung listened to everything, but he did not waver. He maintained a firm, composed demeanor, refusing to let emotions carry him away as they had in the past. His voice was calm, yet decisive, as he demanded that they present all documentation and clearly justify every amount and every figure they were claiming. He spoke of the law, of the boundary between a civil agreement and illegal conduct, not raising his voice, yet saying enough to make them realize that this time he had not come in a position of weakness. His resolve caused the atmosphere to shift, and the initial harsh words gradually gave way to caution. After a prolonged standoff, faced with Hung's clear arguments and unyielding stance, the lenders were forced to back down. Their unreasonable demands were withdrawn one by one, and in the end, they agreed to accept only the original principal amount. That moment carried no visible triumph or relief, only the necessary conclusion to a series of tense days that had dragged on for far too long. Hung carefully checked the loan document bearing his mother's signature. He read each line, cross-checked every detail, determined to ensure that everything truly ended here, leaving no loopholes for future trouble. Once fully assured, he paid the agreed amount in full and took back the papers from the other side. Without hesitation or delay, Hung tore the document up right in front of everyone. That decisive act was not merely the settlement of a debt, but a clean break from a past filled with mistakes and pain. Throughout the conversation, past mistakes were repeatedly dragged back into the open. The harsh reminders and blunt accusations left Hung's mother with no choice but to bow her head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The shame was clear on her face, needing no further explanation. Each remark felt like a cut to the heart, forcing her to relive the reckless decisions that had plunged the entire family into a cycle of debt and fear. Hung stood there and listened, the exhaustion in his voice impossible to hide. It was not only the fatigue of a grueling negotiation, but the weariness accumulated over years of bearing the consequences of mistakes that were not his own. When he finally spoke, his voice dropped, clear and direct. He said this was the last time he would step in to resolve such matters. He had done everything he could and endured enough. If it were to happen again, if those wrong paths were chosen once more, he would no longer be able to save anyone, no matter how much it might hurt. His words were not a threat, but a final boundary drawn after far too much patience. When the meeting ended, the space seemed to lighten slightly, though the heaviness still lingered. Only then did Hung's mother truly feel the release of a burden that had pressed on her shoulders for nearly her entire life. Her hands trembled, her eyes reddened with tears, and she thanked her son again and again, her words broken and repetitive, as if she had no other way to express the remorse and gratitude flooding her heart. She promised, with all the sincerity she had left, that she would never again return to those wrong paths, never again allow thoughtless decisions to destroy her son's life. Hung said little. He simply told his mother to return and thank the old woman who had taken her in, to pack her belongings neatly, and, if there was a chance, to invite the old woman to visit their home, especially during holidays and Tet. The instruction was simple, free of formality or show, yet it carried deep respect for the person who had offered help when his family was at its lowest. In the end, everything closed in a heavy but necessary silence, like a final period marking the end of unstable days, and the beginning of a chapter that everyone hoped would be more peaceful. Late in the afternoon, when the sunlight had faded behind the trees lining the road, Hung returned home with fatigue still lingering in every step. A long day filled with tension weighed heavily on his shoulders, but the moment he caught sight of Hoài Ca from afar, his heavy thoughts immediately shifted. She had taken the chance to go out to the nearby apple orchard to harvest, believing her leg had recovered enough that she no longer needed to be overly cautious like before. Neatly placed baskets of apples sat by the path, Hoài Ca's hands still dusted with soil, her hair slightly tousled by the evening wind. Seeing that scene, Hung could not hide the mix of emotions rising inside him. He felt worried and deeply moved at the same time. Although he knew Hoài Ca did not want to become a burden, did not want to be confined to the house, her going out on her own when her leg had only just recovered still unsettled him. Hung quickly stepped toward her, supporting her gently, his voice low but urgent as he reminded her not to be careless. He feared that when night fell and the temperature dropped, her leg might swell again, that the dull pain would return as it had in the days before. There was no scolding, no harsh words, only the very real concern of someone who always placed her safety above everything else. On the way home, their steps slowed. The familiar road was quiet now, filled only with the sound of the wind and a few distant noises of the late afternoon. Hoài Ca walked close beside Hung, letting him steady her, not objecting, nor trying to appear strong as she usually did. After a while, she spoke softly, her voice low and even, as if afraid to break the stillness surrounding them. Hoài Ca said she understood everything he had done that day, understood the pressure and the choices he had been forced to face. She said that some people might think he was too soft-hearted, that he always stepped in to shoulder other people's burdens, making life harder for himself. But Hoài Ca also knew and believed that many others would see him differently, as a devoted son, willing to bear loss and sacrifice to deal with the consequences, to close the chapter on mistakes he himself had not created. She spoke calmly, without defending or judging, emphasizing only the most important thing, that he had done what his conscience told him was right, and that was what allowed a person to live with peace afterward. Hung did not reply right away. He remained silent, his eyes fixed ahead, but every word Hoài Ca spoke seemed to seep in, touching the deepest thoughts he had never voiced. That silence was not avoidance, but a necessary pause for him to face himself. In that moment, Hung clearly felt his heart grow much lighter. The inner conflict, guilt, and tension that had followed him for days seemed to be set down, not because all problems had disappeared, but because he knew he had fulfilled his duty, had not turned away from responsibility. The stormy days temporarily came to a close in such quietness. There was no burst of joy, no exaggerated sigh of relief, only a fragile sense of peace, just enough to allow one to keep moving forward. Hung understood that he still had to return to work, to the busyness of everyday life, where nothing stopped for anyone. But this time, he returned with a different mindset. No longer carrying himself in sheer exhaustion, no longer acting only out of obligation, but with a clear resolve formed after everything he had been through. He knew he needed to protect his small family, protect Hoài Ca, protect the simple yet precious things they shared. The past had left too many painful lessons, and Hung would not allow those mistakes to be repeated again. The road ahead might still hold many challenges, but at least at this moment, he had a firmer anchor, the understanding, companionship, and quiet trust that Hoài Ca gave him, so they could continue walking together into the ordinary days that were slowly returning.
Hello mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình nhé. Cái này nó đang bị mỗi cái chỗ này. Sao lại không lấy được cơ? Cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều vì đã theo dõi và ủng hộ cho kênh của mình